The Law Society should be particularly cognizant of the complaints here from women in the legal profession who are very understandably and rightly grumpy about how the Law Society has handled this case.
All right. The Women of the Law Journal have several complaints. They don't like Jordan Peterson's views, racist, sexist and so on. They want the Law Society newsletter to have a process in place to prevent the spreading of offensive and inappropriate views. They ask why the Law Society is giving lawyers with inappropriate or discriminatory views a platform. Thomas Bloy is joining us from Evolution Lawyers. Thomas, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. The literal complaint was to do with your mentioning Jordan Peterson. Are you surprised by the call to excise references to Jordan Peterson from your article?
I would. Well, if we were in America, I think I wouldn't be surprised. I follow the stuff on YouTube that tends to show up there. I thought in New Zealand we still had an open platform for free debate, and the problem with the response for me is that I might be wrong, and I'm happy to talk about it, happy to be shown to be wrong, but when they just throw labels at you and start personal attacks, you're no longer debating the ideas, and you can't actually win at that point. That's the bit that worries me about their response.
The threshold for censorship, or whatever word you like to use, is inappropriate or discriminatory views. And the obvious question is, who decides? That's the issue, isn't it?
They decide. That's the point. They made the comment that surely we've gotten to a point in society where not every idea is valid. And again, valid, who defines that? I would just love to actually debate the real ideas, but the mere reference to a controversial academic is enough to get me thrown into a group of alt-right people, supposedly, who accept the worst possible interpretation of everything Jordan Peterson has said, and then they judge me accordingly. At that point, I think that's a win. It's a reprehensible argument style, but it's effective.
Do you think, though, that they're not suggesting that you not share your ideas, but that this particular platform was the wrong place for your ideas and space should have been made for someone else's?
Oh, then that's an argument, sure. The Law Society did publish both views, though, and I think most people understand that republishing something, even liking something on a social media platform, isn't necessarily endorsement of it. You can republish something or like something just because you like this person took the time to say it. I've had many comments of people saying, I disagree with Jordan Peterson, I disagree with you, but I'm very unhappy with the response. And the amount of support has actually been surprising.
Okay. Are you irked by the response, considering you'd set out to bat for diversity and Me Too?
Well, I'm annoyed with the response for a whole lot of reasons. It's mainly the offensive labels. They're so charged that I'm now in a position where I'm immediately on the defensive. I have to prove to people that I'm not a racist.
But surely, given the context of the passion around the subject, you shouldn't have been surprised.
I was hoping that from an academic peer-reviewed journal, there would be reasoned analysis and thoughtful debate, and there was none of that.
All right, thank you for joining us on it too, Thomas. Thomas Bloy. Michelle Court's been on the panel today. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Jim.
Always a pleasure. And Bernard Hickey.
Thank you.
Thanks for both your thoughts today. Checkpoint is coming up, and we'll see everybody tomorrow.
Tō te maira I hoa mā, hei kōrero, kei te haere, hei kaupapa, kei te karawhiora. Welcome to Checkpoint tonight. Another major player in the construction sector hits a financial wall. $40 million owed, subbies out of pocket and can't yet get their tools and equipment back. After Mainzeal, Fletchers and others, what's going so badly wrong? Pauline Kingi stands down as head of the inquiry into the appointment of the Deputy Police Commissioner Wally Haumaha just hours after the Minister said she was the right person for the job. Primary school teachers will strike for a day, a fortnight from today. All the homeowners of a failed housing development in Tauranga are moving to sue the City Council. And in Mexico, 101 people on board, all of them have survived a plane crash. All of that and more coming up.
RNZ News at 5. Kia orana, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten Aho. The head of an inquiry into the appointment of the Deputy Police Commissioner has quit after questions were raised about whether she had a personal conflict of interest. Pauline Kingi was appointed to head the inquiry into the process that led to Wally Homaha being made Deputy Police Commissioner, despite his comments in 2004 defending police officers accused of rape. The National Party had called for Dr Kingi to be sacked because she had endorsed Mr Homaha on the networking website LinkedIn. The Internal Affairs Minister, Tracy Martin, announced the resignation in Parliament.
It is with regret that I have to inform the House that Dr Pauline Kingi advised the government just before I came to the House that she is going to stand down from the inquiry.
Tracy Martin, the Internal Affairs Minister. The receivers of major building firm Ebert Construction say initial signs suggest the company could owe as much as $40 million. Receivers were appointed last night and workers arrived at building sites this morning to find out they were shut out. The receivers, PwC, says preliminary information from Ebert Construction suggests there could be significant losses from its existing contracts. John Fisk says with multi-million-dollar contracts and slim margins, things can go wrong very quickly. The company specialises in commercial and industrial building. Primary and intermediate teachers and principals are hoping the public will support their decision to extend their first strike in 24 years to a full day. The strike will go ahead on August the 15th unless a solution is found during mediation with the Education Ministry. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Teachers told RNZ News today the full-day strike sends a much stronger message to the government and the public than a half-day. They say they know the action will inconvenience many parents, but what they are fighting for is too important. It includes higher pay rates to attract more teachers and smaller class sizes. The Educational Institute has been seeking a 16% pay rise and the Education Ministry has offered increases ranging from 6 to 14%. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Passengers on a plane which crashed in northern Mexico say it's a miracle they survived. The airliner, with 102 passengers and crew on board, crashed into a field in Durango shortly after takeoff. TV images show the severely damaged body of the plane lying in scrubland and a column of smoke rising into the sky. The BBC's Ana Gabriela Rojas says she's been talking with one woman who walked from the wreckage.
She just sprained her ankle, so she's like really happy to be alive. She said like there were like panic scenes, like people were bleeding, very difficult to get out. It was the wreckage was like really bad. It was like a lot of smoke and fire, but she just tried to jump into one of the places that it was possible, and she survived, and she's so happy to be alive.
The airport operator says early data suggests bad weather was the cause of the crash. A group promoting the Central North Island says it's too early to know what effect Saturday's fatal bus crash near the Tūroa ski field might have on tourist numbers. An 11-year-old, Hannah Francis, was killed and 18 others injured when a Ruapehu Alpine Lifts shuttle crashed after an apparent brake failure. Anne-Marie May reports.
The Peaks Motor Inn in Ohakune has had 3 cancellations since the weekend. Its manager, Smita Duvedi, says some are regular guests who do not have four-wheel drives and want to delay their visits.
Then they said that they will do it when their husband will be with them so that they are more comfortable driving up. But they want to just cancel those bookings. They don't feel very comfortable or safe taking the bus or shuttle up there.
However, Visit Ruapehu's General Manager Joe Kennedy says it is early days and most people are still just shocked and saddened by what happened.
Ruapehu is an amazingly safe, beautiful outdoors destination that, the sun's shining and the snow's good, and it's just a really horrible, unfortunate accident.
Joe Kennedy says until investigations into the crash are completed, it is impossible to speculate on the effect it might have on tourism in the area. This is Anne-Marie May.
A former manager at Te Papa says the museum's decision to hit the pause button on job cuts is a victory for staff and critics of the restructure. Last month it was revealed the museum was planning to cut staff in its collections area. Te Papa now says this will wait until a review of the department by an international panel. A former manager of collection services, Mike Rudge, says today was marked in the calendar as D-Day.
The guillotine didn't drop today, and the museum administrators, the board, have taken a step back and said we'd better have another look at this. So yes, in that sense, it's a win.
Mike Rudge says it's important that truly impartial scientists are appointed to the expert panel. It's 5:05. Sport. The Hurricanes and All Black hooker Dane Coles won't be playing until September or October and will make his return playing for Wellington in the domestic competition. All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says Coles is progressing well after 9 months on the sidelines with a knee injury, but concedes he isn't ready to play. Hansen says they'll name Coles in the Rugby Championship squad with hopes he'll be fit for their final couple of matches.
We're thinking late September or October, so more than likely we'll name him so then we can have access to him as the season goes on, but he'll come back through the Mitre 10 team.
The All Blacks' final match is against South Africa on October the 7th. The Northern Mystics shooter Maria Folau will be sizing up against old foe Central Coast captain Katrina Grant tonight in a bid to stay alive in the ANZ Premiership. Both players have spent a lot of time over the years playing against each other domestically and internationally, and Folau says the informed defender's star status doesn't faze her.
I love playing against whoever puts on that goal defence bib. I feel like the competition's been producing some great defenders, and I'm really happy because it's awesome seeing depth in New Zealand. So yeah, playing against my old foe, Katrina Grant, it'll be fun. It's always a great tussle against her.
Maria Folau, that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Simon Morris reviews Funny Cow. It's about a female comedian trying to make her way in the stand-up universe. There's a window on the world of Taiwan trying to make its way in China's shadow. And then there's the Candle Wasters, 4 young women and a token bloke who are about to launch a new version of Hamlet online.
We know that this drug is New Zealand's deadliest recreational drug in terms of taking it and then a direct relationship with death. Alcohol is the #1 overall in terms of total population, but we've never had anything like this before. 45 deaths within a year directly related to taking the drug at the time. So they take it and drop dead.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine spells and isolated showers today. Areas of fog tomorrow morning, otherwise mainly fine. Cloud increasing later tomorrow and rain developing about Taranaki. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, showers about Bay of Plenty, sometimes heavy, and a few spots of rain spreading to Gisborne. Manawatu to Wellington, including Taihepe, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Long fine spells, rain developing late tomorrow for Horowhenua to Wellington. Marlborough and Nelson fine today, rain developing tomorrow, heavy later. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers, heavy at times with possible thunderstorms. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine with variable high cloud, however patchy rain developing tomorrow afternoon and becoming persistent about eastern Otago later. The Chatham Islands, rain developing this evening, easing to a few showers tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten, and thank you everyone for joining us. Coming up on the program tonight, Wally Homaha, Dr Pauline Kingi and Linked Out. Teachers striking in the lawsuit arising from a Tauranga property development cluster. Quite remarkable survival story of all the passengers on board that plane crash in Mexico. All of that and more in the next 90 minutes. But we begin tonight with another financial disaster in our construction sector. After the 2013 collapse of Mainzeal and the huge losses suffered by Fletcher Building, Ebert Construction has gone into receivership, with early estimates suggesting it owes up to $40 million. The company specialises in commercial and industrial work and has several major projects on the go at the moment. But those working on them showed up to their jobs this morning to find there's nothing they can do, no money on the horizon, and they couldn't even enter building sites to get their equipment and tools out so they could go and work elsewhere. Later on Checkpoint, we'll talk to the receiver, John Fisk. There are some big picture issues here, but we start with this report from Tom Furley.
Towers of scaffolding stand empty, and the usual sound of tools and machinery remain quiet. Until this morning, those turning up to build the Union Green apartment building in Auckland CBD thought it'd just be a normal day on the job.
Nowhere to work. Our boss told us our site's been shut down, and we found out we were a bit frustrated because we still had all our tools on site, so we're just trying to get them back. Because, those tools help us feed our families, and the banks don't care about that, so we're just doing our best to get as much offside as we can.
That's builder Lotu Samuela, who, like many others, was left frustrated and uncertain about where to next. No tools means no work, even if they do have other contracts to go to. It's the latest in a string of high-profile large construction companies to run into trouble. Across from the Union Green site, cranes working on the International Convention Centre are prominent in the city's skyline. The job's been handled by Fletcher's, which is recovering after losing nearly $1 billion over the past 2 years on big construction projects that include that centre and Christchurch's Justice Precinct. The Orange H group of companies went into receivership in May, owing millions. Some subcontractors RNZ spoke to outside the Union Green site this morning said they were owed tens of thousands of dollars, others in the hundreds of thousands. PricewaterhouseCoopers were appointed receivers last night. Receiver John Fisk says directors received information last week that suggested there would be significant losses from its existing contracts.
We've got some initial information from the company. It looks like there could be up to $40 million that's owing to creditors in total. But, that number will need to be reviewed and we'll have a better idea on that as the receivership progresses.
The amount of risk companies are taking on board has been a growing concern for the industry. A new survey by Registered Master Builders has found half the sector thought it wasn't performing to its potential because of the risk allocation in contracts. John Fisk says the risk in some construction contracts isn't fairly reflected in the margins.
With these big commercial contracts, things can change very rapidly because they're dealing with reasonably skinny margins and big numbers, so things can turn very quickly. A number of the contracts that they've got on are multi-million-dollar contracts. So if you're into damages or delays, things can turn south very quickly.
The head of the Building Industry Federation, Bruce Conn, says contractors are being pressed into taking fixed price contracts.
In the meantime, we have an inflationary period with rates of tradesmen going up significantly, and we also have increased transport difficulties, particularly in Auckland. Those all add costs onto the building process, and contractual obligations in terms of a set price, it becomes very tough on the contractor.
The receivership has left its clients scrambling. Myland Partners, behind the Union Green development, says it was only told by receivers this morning and it's taking advice. Ebert is also in charge of the new Taiho Mai mental health facilities at Middlemore Hospital, and the county's Manukau District Health Board is also having to consider its options. Meanwhile, the receivers say they'll be working to allow subcontractors like Chris Fry access to the sites to get their tools as quickly as possible.
Well, we're just worried about where we've got to work. Yeah. That's it. What can we do? Got nowhere to go.
For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Later in the program, we're going to talk to John Fisk at some length about the particular, which is the receivership here, and the Universal, which is a construction industry in which margins are very, very tight. If you are one of the creditors owed money by Ebert, please text us 2101. We'd love to talk to you. Let's change subject now, though, for the time being. The head of the inquiry into the appointment of the Deputy Police Commissioner, Wally Homaha, has quit after questions were repeatedly raised about a personal conflict of interest. Dr. Pauline Kingi was leading an investigation into the process that led to Mr. Homaha being appointed, despite comments he made in 2004 defending police officers accused of rape. The Internal Affairs Minister, Tracy Martin, made the surprise announcement that Dr. Kingi was stepping down during question time in Parliament, saying she'd become the victim of unwarranted attacks. Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell, was there.
Pauline Kingi was appointed to lead the inquiry last month, but she'd barely got her feet under the desk when National started asking questions about her endorsing Wally Homaha 23 times on the website LinkedIn. National MP Chris Bishop claimed that constituted a major conflict of interest, but the minister responsible for the inquiry, Tracy Martin, said this morning she failed to see how that was the case and backed Dr. Kingi. But this afternoon, Ms Martin told Parliament with regret the former senior public servant had stood down from the role.
Ever since she was appointed to the role, she has been the subject of political attack. Those have been attacks on her integrity, attacks on her reputation, and even attacks on her legal qualification. Dr. Kingi has a 28-year career in public service as both a community member and senior public servant and as a lawyer. She was asked to perform a public duty and yet became the subject of an undue and unwarranted criticism.
Chris Bishop asked how the controversy could have come about.
How has she let herself and the government get into a position where they appointed to lead an independent inquiry someone who has close connections to the subject of the inquiry and who has endorsed him 23 times on LinkedIn?
Tracy Martin took issue with his claim of close connections, but was unable to finish answering as the barracking from National MPs got out of hand.
Again, advice has been received from the Cabinet Office and from this Ms Kingi resigned because of disgusting accusations by the opposition that impinged her integrity based on a LinkedIn profile, which is a social media account that has been shown and advice has been received does not meet the threshold of conflict.
I'm very close to the member and I cannot hear her, mainly I think because opposition members' barracking is coming through my mics.
Outside Parliament, Tracy Martin told reporters she just did not think the LinkedIn endorsements were a big deal or that it looked that bad.
The advice I have received is that this is not a conflict or a potential conflict, that social media acquaintances, whether they be friends on Facebook or whether they be endorsement on LinkedIn, do not meet the threshold for conflict or perceived conflict. We're going to have a conversation now. The fact that this person of great integrity has been attacked for something that was on social media.
But Chris Bishop said Pauline Kingi simply could not lead an inquiry into the appointment of someone she'd endorsed more than 20 times.
She's done the right thing. The real question now is for the government. How was she appointed in the first place? And why was Tracy Martin defending her so ardently yesterday and, basically 24 hours later, she's welcoming her resignation?
The acting Prime Minister Winston Peters says the government continued to back Dr Kingi, but she left because of the political attacks.
Look, if I was in a position, I wouldn't stand around taking those sort of attacks. I'd either mount a defamation case against them or I'd just stand down.
The government will now have to start the process of finding a replacement for Pauline Kingi, whose departure is being chalked up as a political win by the National Party. Atu I te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Chris Bramwalaho.
17 minutes past 5. We're just going to look quickly at a quite remarkable story coming out of Mexico. A nearly full domestic flight crashed soon after takeoff in Mexico early this morning, bursting into flames on impact. So it crashed, it burst into flames. There were more than 100 people on board. Most were injured, we understand, but reports suggest everyone has escaped with their life. Every single passenger and crew member. Zach Fleming has more.
Smoke billowing from the wreckage, the plane's roof burned off. Pictures taken moments after the crash suggest the worst. 104 people on board, 97 passengers and 4 crew. Aeromexico Flight 2431 crashed in a field in Durango, Mexico, just after 4 p.m. local time. 85 were injured, 2 of them are in a critical condition. But remarkably, everyone on board survived. Relief on the faces of families who'd rushed to the airport to check if their loved ones were on board. The flight was headed to Mexico City, but took off in bad weather. Local authorities say it made an emergency landing soon after, just 10 kilometres from the airport. Emergency services were on the scene quickly. The airplane is a Brazilian-made Embraer. The company says it will cooperate with investigators. The head of Mexico's Civil Aviation Agency says the plane's voice and data recorders will be recovered and an investigation launched. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Let's head from Mexico to the Central Plateau. The Ruapehu District Council says it will urgently investigate safety issues raised in a Checkpoint story last night following Saturday's fatal bus crash which claimed the life of an 11-year-old Auckland girl. Chief Executive Clive Manley was unaware today of safety concerns raised by other skiers travelling on other shuttles on the mountain on Saturday, but said he would take immediate action. It comes as RAL, the company which owned the bus involved in Saturday's fatal crash, revealed to Checkpoint a few minutes ago it doesn't know how many passengers are still in hospital or have contact details for all those on board. Bridget Burke reports.
I would be devastated, first of all. If they were true, it would be absolutely terrible.
The Chief Executive of the Ruapehu Council, Clive Manley, responding to safety concerns raised on Checkpoint about some of Mount Ruapehu's other shuttle buses since Saturday's fatal accident.
There is absolutely no substance that we've ever been presented to substantiate that.
But there is evidence. Sophie Leather gave Checkpoint photos of the shuttle she got into on Saturday morning in National Park.
Some of the chairs are actually held together with wire, it appears to be, or string. And that's not even all of the chairs in the photo. Not included in the photo, the chair in front of me was fully broken, not held up by any wires, and I was trying to hold that up with my feet. And there was, alcohol bottles, which you can see in the photo, holding in the cup holders. There was a handle on the back of the chair, which was where the joke was made about a crash. If someone went to brace himself, we went around a corner and the lady went to brace herself and her child. And just going around a small corner, the entire handle came off the chair. And so we were pretty all horrified at that, to be honest. We all started talking about how dangerous it was.
This passenger told Checkpoint she had an uneventful journey on a shuttle up the mountain on Saturday, but coming down from Whakapapa was another story.
As the bus came in, he directed us over to the far where there's a snowbank, and so we just walked towards that. And he kept going, and I thought, where the hell's he taking us? And so he gently parked the corner of the bus up against the snowbank. And I looked and thought, how the heck are we going to get on this? And I got in and said to him, frickin' hell, it was actually a swear word. You've parked close to the bank, it's hard to get on. And he just laughed and says, my parking brakes failed.
3 separate incidents on 3 imported Mitsubishi Fuso buses owned by 3 different people. A fatal accident which killed 11-year-old Hannah Francis and seriously injured 18 others on a bus operated by RAL. A bus with broken seats and handles wired together, transporting skiers up and down the mountain, owned by Summit Shuttles and leased to RAL. And a bus with no working handbrake, operated by Rome Aotearoa. Today, the CEO of the Ruapehu Council was none the wiser and had to be briefed by our reporter, Robin Martin.
We'll try and be a little bit clearer. So the seats being strapped together and kind of falling to pieces, there was photographic evidence, and that was sent in by a bus passenger, not a rival operator. The bus that was parked into a snow bank to prevent it rolling away when it was parked, the operator acknowledges that was a reality. That was another issue that was reported by a passenger. As the chief executive of this district,
yep.
How do you feel? Those are verified incidents. They all happened on the same day as the crash over the weekend. Is that acceptable?
First of all, I have not been given that information. What you're saying, and I've got no reason to doubt it, obviously, because you said it, that has not been reported to me. I would take those comments extremely seriously. The actual transport obviously is dealt with by, the council doesn't run the buses, nor do we let the contract, but that would not excuse it. We would not want to put anyone at risk. So if those views are substantiated, and I've got no reason to doubt what you're saying, we would have extreme concern and would take action regarding it.
All of the affected vehicles were taken off the road on Monday for servicing and safety checks. Mr Manley said the council had recently upgraded the Turoa access road, and while he didn't believe it played a role in the fatal accident, it was too early to speculate. He was also unaware RAL shuttles had failed multiple certificate of fitness inspections. Seasoned skier Tineka Sutton also took a shuttle up the mountain on Saturday.
We were told to just take our poles and skis and boards onto the bus. That was something that really concerned me, because the year before everything had been placed outside and in the holds.
Tineka says she was nervous on the shuttle ride down.
A lot of heavy braking, and with that excessive braking, you could just smell a hot mechanical sort of smell. And I don't know whether that's normal for those buses, but it seemed to me that the drivers seemed to need to pump the brakes quite a lot. It was definitely sort of a excessive pumping action of braking that he was needing to do. And there was also even one point where he had to brake suddenly because a vehicle in front got a little bit of a fright with the tow truck coming past them. There was babies crying, and we were all feeling really nervous after that because we'd all been thrown forward and there were people standing. Everyone was feeling quite emotional and nervous, and I felt sick to my stomach to think that might have been shortchanged, and that there's not potentially more stringent regulations around the servicing of these vehicles and the safety of these vehicles, considering the road that they are travelling and the kind of braking that is needed coming down that mountain.
Clive Manley says it's the regional council who works with Ruapehu Alpine Lifts to oversee shuttle operations.
The buses themselves we run with other agencies, and we will investigate the issues you've raised with urgency, because it would give me great concern if what you're saying is operating that way.
RAL has declined to comment, but told Checkpoint a short time ago it doesn't have a manifest of passengers on board the fatal bus crash or their contact details. It also doesn't know how many passengers are still in hospital. Its CEO, Ross Copeland, asks passengers who haven't been spoken to since to email him directly. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
26 minutes past 5. All the homeowners of a failed housing development in Tauranga will now sue the City Council unless it presents them with a better compensation offer. The Tauranga City Council signed off on what was shoddy construction work at the Bella Vista development, but later deemed the homes too dangerous to live in. Last week it offered to buy back the homes for the price residents paid for them up to 3 years ago, but residents say the offer locks them out of buying another house in the current housing market. Eva Corlett was in Tauranga for the announcement.
I'm standing in front of the Bella Vista housing development in Tauranga, where the former residents have announced that they are also going to pursue legal action against the Tauranga City Council. They are standing in front of their former homes, deemed now unlivable and tipped for demolition. Some of them are fully finished, others in various states of build. Their manicured gardens are now overgrown, and there's a 6-foot wire fence that's surrounding the entire block. The group held one another, while some welled with tears as homeowner Sasha Tyrell described their situation.
We entered into contracts, built homes and put trust in our council to carry out its statutory functions and duty of care. However, instead, they failed us. They broke their own rules and failed to adequately perform their job. For that, we are now being punished, and through no fault of our own, we have found ourselves homeless.
The homeowners feel that they've been left no choice.
We have found ourselves in a position where we must now issue court proceedings and take action against the council. It has become apparent that the council is not prepared to do what is fair and just in this situation, and therefore we have no choice but to issue proceedings and turn to the legal system for help. This is not a decision that we have taken lightly. We are real people, and we have lives and families that we want to be able to return to.
The residents couldn't yet say what compensation they were seeking, but they say if council altered its offer to pay market value for the properties, then they would halt legal action. Neighbours, family and the members of the wider Tauranga community gathered in support of the residents. Anne and David, who are parents to one of the homeowners, live up the road from the development. They're in their 80s and had hoped their family, currently living in Brisbane, would be living closer to them.
Heartache, to be honest, not to have them here and to have my daughter here for the rest of my life, to be honest. No, and naturally, and my grandchildren, my son-in-law. Seeing the kids grow up, and they want to come back. So it makes it very, very hard.
And I suppose what is your message for the council and all of this?
Get on with the job and complete it to everyone's satisfaction.
Yeah. And for the family to have justice.
And it's not just family affected. Neighbours Jill Finch and Pauline Wilkinson have considered getting an independent assessment of their own home, which is a few years older than the Bella Vista development.
You do question whether a council's code of compliance certificate means anything anymore. I mean, our house is several years older than these ones, but it does make you question everything in the whole city. as far as the council's codes of compliance.
So there's a real sort of loss of trust there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a terribly sad situation for these people.
The council turned down an invitation to the announcement. In an emailed statement, its chair, Gary Poole, says the council will consider the homeowners' response to the offer. He says the negotiations are confidential. I tauranga mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko iwa ko let tēnei.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program before 6 o'clock, primary school teachers will walk off the job for the first time in 24 years, a one-day strike a fortnight from today. Vindication for a trustee sacked by the Kohanga Reo National Trust for blowing the whistle following allegations of wrongdoing. President Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, goes on trial in the US court on tax and bank fraud charges. Lots in our first half hour, and we'd love your feedback on any of it. Bella Vista in Tauranga, Ebert Construction, the Mount Ruapehu shuttles, the teacher strike coming up, 2101. You can text us on or you can tweet us. And email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Plus, don't forget we're on Facebook. Madison next with business news, but before it all, what's the time, Katrina Batten?
It is 5:30.
Take it away.
The Internal Affairs Minister says she regrets that the head of an inquiry into the appointment of Wally Homaha has stood down. Pauline Kingi was to head the inquiry into how he was made Deputy Police Commissioner despite comments defending police officers accused of rape. Tracy Martin says Dr Kingi has been subjected to political attacks over her integrity, reputation and even her legal qualifications. The receivers of major building firm Ebert Construction say the industry's multi-million-dollar contracts and slim margins mean things can go wrong very quickly. PwC says it looks as though the company could owe $40 million. Workers arrived at building sites this morning to find they were shut out and unable to access their own tools. Primary and intermediate teachers and principals are hoping people will support their decision to extend their first strike in 24 years to a full day. About 29,000 Educational Institute members will go on strike on August the 15th unless they find a solution during mediation with the Education Ministry. The union has been seeking a 16% pay rise and smaller class sizes, and the Education Ministry has offered increases ranging from 6 to 14%. A former manager at Te Papa says the museum's decision to put job cuts on hold is a victory for staff and the scientists who criticised the restructure. Last month it was revealed the museum was planning to cut its collection staff, but it will now wait for a review of its natural history collections by an international panel. Mike Rudge says truly impartial scientists must be appointed to the expert panel. Corrections says it's reviewing its operations after footage emerged of a Mangal mob member getting tattooed in Rimutaka prison. The video uploaded 2 weeks ago to YouTube shows a man tattooing a large letter M on another prisoner's leg. The department says all 4 men were involved are being charged with misconduct. In Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission says the ruling ZANU-PF party has won a majority of seats in Parliament after yesterday's vote. ZANU-PF has 109 seats against 41 for the opposition movement for democratic change. 58 seats are yet to be finalised. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you so much indeed, Katrina. 6 is ages away, by the way. It's just
heaps of time.
Heaps of time. Let's turn to business news now with Madison Reedy, who is on the other side of me. Madison, we've looked at Ebert a bit today, so we're going to talk about other things. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. We're going to talk to the receiver later in the program, but we're going to look at unemployment, which is edged up from a 9-year low. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so today it came out for Statistics New Zealand's quarterly results for the 3 months to June. It rose a tiny amount, so earlier this year we did have that record 9-year low, so that was at the start of the year 4.4%, which was, I guess, good news all round. Now it's risen slightly to 4.5%. So the government wants it at 4%, and they're still aiming for that. The Employment Minister came out today, Willie Jackson, and said, you know, we're still aiming for that. But it's not all bad news. You know, he and the rest of the market shouldn't be too dampened by the fact that it's risen slightly, because there were a few small wins within that as well. So women are at their lowest unemployment rate that they've ever been at.
Full stop.
Full stop, which is, you know, certainly good news. The same with Māori as well, is at their lowest unemployment rate. So
full stop.
Since they've recorded numbers, so since 2004 is as far as the numbers go back. So only back till then. I mean, you could imagine that back in the day, the unemployment rate of women was quite different to what it would be now. But so there certainly were some small wins, and they're also NEETs. So that's the people not in employment, education, or training. So they're typically, you know, the kind of marginalised youth that people think are sitting on the couch all day not doing anything. So the number of those people are also reduced. So 9,000 of them got jobs in the June quarter, which was great. So we've had that as well. But there has been a bit of an inkling with wage inflation. So that has risen 3% as well to be $31 an hour. And also remember, we're on the cusp of the minimum wage rise too. So that happened in April. So that certainly would have contributed to that. So there was some economic commentary from some economists that came out today, and Kiwibank, their economists, called this the fire starter to inflation as a whole. So it's kind of pending as to what may happen there.
So what are they talking about? So Kiwibank is saying that the inflationary pressures are beginning to become meaningful, and we will see some inflation. So therefore we will see interest rate rises, obviously, which is kind of at odds with what the survey you were talking about yesterday was saying, which seemed to be anti-inflationary, right? Because all the employers, business confidence was really bummed out.
Exactly, and one thing they are obviously worried about is inflation, and that's one thing that businesses are, is their main concern, that their wage costs will rise as a result of the minimum wage going up. And there are a particular type of businesses as well who fall most victim to that. So your retailers who have more kind of hourly paid staff that are affected by that minimum wage rise.
Because they're near the minimum wage or on it. Yeah.
Exactly. So they have more staff that they now need to pay more. So we have seen an inflation in that, whether or not that will flow out to, inflationary prices and other things.
Increased spending, yeah.
Exactly, like consumables and things like that, food and the likes. And if you would like a regional breakdown, I've got one of those for you too. So the worst unemployment is in the Manawatu Whanganui region. That was at 6.6%. The best was in Southland. It's low at 3%. Farmers, possibly.
Yeah, wow. And what was the national average again? What was it? 4.5, wasn't it?
4.5%.
Yeah,
and at the start of this year, it was 4.4, which was the lowest record low for 9 years.
Yeah.
So it's not all too bad.
No. What happened on the markets today, Madison?
The markets, we closed down 0.7%, so 62 points to close at 8860. That was the NZX Top 50 Index. New Zealand dollars buying at 67.9 US cents, 91.6 Australian and 51.8 British pence.
Madison Reedy, thank you very much indeed. Thousands of primary teachers and principals will walk off the job in a fortnight for the first time in 24 years unless mediation between the union and the Ministry of Education is successful. Nearly 30,000 members of the Educational Institute are expected to strike on August the 15th after voting to extend their industrial action from half a day to a day. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
Primary and intermediate school teachers and principals are hoping their decision to extend their strike to a whole day in a fortnight's time will drive home the seriousness of their cause. And in Wellington today, parents were backing the action.
Yeah, no, I really do support what they're doing, and I'm more than happy to work from home and do what it takes. Even if I couldn't, I would still be happy and behind them, because they do an awesome job.
I am fully supportive of the teachers. I think they work incredibly hard. I'm on my school board and I see firsthand what they do, and I think they deserve far more than they're getting at the moment.
Teachers are seeking a 16% pay rise and smaller class sizes. The Education Ministry has offered increases ranging from 14% for new teachers to about 6% for the most experienced, and between 11 and 6% for principals. In the staff room of a Wellington primary school, teachers like Alistair Button say the decision to take a full day of industrial action is the right move.
I thought the half-day strike was a weak gesture. I think a full-day strike is a minimum. The issues here are really important. It's not just about pay, and I think it's time that the union stood up and teachers stood up and actually really were strong, and they're advocating for the profession.
Another teacher, Jamie Quayle, says a full day off the job sends a much stronger message, and he hopes the public is supportive.
I hope that they will be behind it, and if they see the issue as serious, which I do, then they should be behind it as well. It's a little bit of inconvenience, sure, but the issues here are very serious.
Jen Wilkinson also supports the move to a full-day strike.
It makes it seem a bit more serious as well. As a parent, though, I have to organise my own child, so it's inconvenient for me as a parent, but it's pretty important as a teacher to stand up and stick together on this issue.
Despite her resolve, Jen Wilkinson is not confident teachers will get what they're after.
Although I'm pretty sceptical, I don't really think it's going to resolve it, to be honest. I mean, the nurses didn't do that well out of their action either, did they? So, who knows? But it's worth a go.
Kaylee Peach also has her doubts.
For me, as a teacher early in my career, we know we're fighting for a little bit more money, and losing a day's worth of pay is potentially a little bit scary, but at the same time it's more than just a higher pay increase. I just want to be teaching.
Rob Kerr was a teacher when they last walked off the job 24 years ago. He reckons it made a big difference, but he's not convinced a strike is the right move this time around.
If the union feels about that going that way, I'll go along with it. Have mixed feelings about the strike. It seems an unfortunate time. The Labour government has shown it wishes to support teachers, and they've got a lot of pressure coming at them, so I will be on strike, but I have mixed feelings about it.
Charles Bisley is another teacher who walked off the job nearly a quarter of a century ago. He believes it's worth taking industrial action again.
Over the last 9 years or so, teachers' pay and conditions have been eroded. Pay parity has kind of slipped back compared with our secondary colleagues, but it's not really about that. It's just about teachers getting recognition for the work they do.
Parents, meanwhile, are already making plans for the day of the strike.
Probably will take a day off unless the daycare is on, the school care is on.
My wife is at home, so the kids will just stay at home and have a lovely day, and yeah.
The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says he's disappointed by teachers' decision and he hopes mediation will find a solution. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Just some breaking news. We've just got a statement from police. 2 people have died in a serious crash in Woodville where a car collided with a train. Now, Woodville is just east of the Manawatu Gorge. Of course, the gorge is closed. So what's that? North Wairarapa, Manawatu, Southern Hawke's Bay. 1 person is in a moderate condition and is being transported to hospital. The police say the serious crash unit is investigating, and Troop Road may be closed for some time. 2 people have died in a crash in Woodville where a car has collided with a train. That just in, we'll try and update you on that if we can. It's 18 minutes to 6. There's been vindication today for a trustee sacked by the Kohanga Reo National Trust for blowing the whistle on allegations of wrongdoing. The High Court today upheld Tony Waho's claim that the trust was wrong to dismiss him in 2014. Now, Mr Waho was fired after he alerted the Minister of Education to concerns about the use of funds by the board and other staff. He also revealed there was a list of allegations levelled at the trust and an attempt to blackmail it. But, as our Māori news correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin reports, the ordeal has had a devastating impact on Mr Waho.
The ousted Kohanga Reo trustee Tony Waho says he's overjoyed that the High Court has put him in the clear. In today's judgment, it ruled he never brought the Kohanga Reo National Trust into disrepute and it was wrong to dismiss him. Speaking on his behalf, his lawyer Felix Geiringer says it's a huge win.
For Tony, it just feels like a complete vindication of everything he's been saying for years now.
And how's he feeling today?
Just over the moon about this. This is just such an enormous relief. It's everything he ever wanted.
In 2014, Tony Waho secretly emailed the then Education Minister Hikia Parata laying things bare. He told her that a list existed that had names of staff with allegations against them, some of which were serious. Mr Waho also revealed that the husband of a disgruntled former employee was using the list to blackmail the trust for $800,000. His email triggered an investigation by the Serious Fraud Office, which later found no criminal activity. But the trust accused Mr Waho of bringing it into disrepute and fired him. Mr Geiringer says his client's been through the ringer.
He lost his position on the trust, which had an income associated with it. He was using that income to fund the mortgage on the land, which he then couldn't fund, and suddenly he's got the bank telling him that they want their money back. He lost other jobs as a consequence. The stress built up to the point that he got terribly sick. He had 2 strokes. He ended up in hospital for quite a while. He's still suffering from that.
The Kohanga Reo National Trust has been ordered to pay Mr Waho what he would have earned since his dismissal, around $100,000. The board said it would take time to review and consider the 30-page judgment before commenting further. For Checkpoint, I'm Lee Marama McLaughlin.
16 minutes to 6. President Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, has gone on trial in a US court on tax and bank fraud charges. It's the first case brought by the legal team of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and the trial could result in Mr Manafort spending the rest of his life in prison. The action came as a result of the Mueller inquiry into Russian interference in the 2016 US presidential election, but relates to Mr Manafort's work as a lobbyist in Ukraine. CNN's Jim Sciutto reports.
Openly denounced by the White House.
They call it the rigged witch hunt.
Yet pressing forward without interruption. Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation has produced a steady stream of indictments and arrests over the last 14 months. It enters a new phase today with the start of the first of 2 trials for Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman. In Virginia, he faces charges of bank and tax fraud. In Washington, he's accused of failing to register as a lobbyist for a foreign government and obstruction of justice. And Mueller may not be done with Manafort. This memo indicates that the special counsel is still investigating whether Manafort was, quote, colluding with Russian government officials, end quote, to interfere in the 2016 election.
There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government.
Manafort's former business partner and former deputy chairman of the Trump campaign, Rick Gates, has already pleaded guilty and will testify against Manafort. Among the others, the special counsel has indicted Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor, and George Papadopoulos, a former campaign aide. Both pleaded guilty to lying to prosecutors, and both are cooperating with the investigation. Konstantin Kilimnik, an associate of Manafort's, who is described in court documents as a suspected Russian intelligence operative. Also indicted, 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities, charged with interfering in the 2016 election. And most recently, another group of 12 Russian nationals, charged with hacking the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. Could more charges be coming? His team has interviewed at least 24 members of the Trump administration and other Trump associates. One crucial remaining question: what has Mueller found out about that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting between Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner, and Russians who promised to share dirt on Hillary Clinton? Trump Jr. has said that he never told his father about the meeting.
There was nothing to tell. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
But sources tell CNN that Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is now claiming that Trump knew of the meeting in advance, and that Cohen is prepared to tell Mueller. Cohen himself may not be on Mueller's to-do list, though, having referred his case to federal investigators in New York. Looming large is whether the special counsel will demand a sit-down interview with President Trump himself.
I've always wanted to do an interview because, look, there's been no collusion.
For now, Mr. Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says any interview is still under negotiation.
I think he shouldn't. I know how convinced he is that he didn't do anything wrong and wants to explain it, and I've seen other people get into trouble thinking that, innocent people.
Rudy Giuliani ending that report from Jim Sciutto. It sounded like he was doing kung fu as he was putting his voice down. Quite peculiar. I think that was graphics moving in the TV piece. Anyway, the government came under fire today after footage emerged of a mongrel mob member getting tattooed in Remataka prison. The 3-minute video shows a man tattooing a large letter M on another prisoner. It was uploaded to YouTube 2 weeks ago. However, correction staff at Remataka only found out about it yesterday morning. The department is now carrying out a review, but questions remain about how it was allowed to happen. Emma Hatton reports.
Scouts of the Mogul Mob Nation.
The video, uploaded to social media a week and a half ago, shows a prisoner filming himself while another prisoner uses a tattoo gun to outline a large letter M on his thigh. The video's been viewed more than 5,000 times. In Parliament today, National MP David Bennett pulled the Corrections Minister Kelvin Davis up on it.
Question number 10, the Honourable David Bennett.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Corrections. What advice has he sought, if any, in relation to footage posted on YouTube which appears to be of mongrel mob gang members using tattooing equipment on one another at Remataka Prison?
Mr Davis replied that Remataka Prison staff had acted quickly and Corrections had asked YouTube to take the video down. However, he says the incident is totally unacceptable.
To have 5 gang members in a cell chanting
gang chants, covering the windows and tattooing each other is totally unacceptable, and I expect corrections to actually deal with this and make sure we don't have a repeat.
Mr Davis says it's unclear how the contraband, a tattoo gun and a cell phone, made its way into the high security pod where the prisoners were, and why staff didn't know about it for 2 weeks. He says an operational review is now underway.
As soon as corrections found out, they identified the prisoners, they located a cell phone. The cell phone's undergoing forensic testing, so when that investigation is complete, we'll know more information about it all.
The Chief Custodial Officer at Corrections New Zealand, Neil Beals, says the ward was fully staffed at the time and it's too early to know how it went undetected.
It is always a concern to me if prisoners are allowed to congregate freely and do things like this and we are not on top of that. I need to know what time of day this was. I need to know what was happening on that unit throughout the day. Were the staff distracted by something else happening? Had they been distracted by other prisoners? There's information that's still to come to light through the operational review.
Mr Beals says 4 prisoners were involved and all are being moved to other jails. He says they've been charged with misconduct.
If found guilty, they can be sanctioned with loss of privileges, such as access to hobbies or telephone calls or visits in excess of minimum entitlements, forfeiture of earnings or even cell confinement.
It is unknown how long the review will take. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
Getting feedback across the board tonight on the teachers going on strike for a day, a fortnight from today. Like the nurses, I support better pay for teachers, but I don't support them expecting this government to fix their problems overnight when the last government let things get to crisis levels while running surpluses. Re Teachers Strike, I listened to your reports about contractors earning less than the minimum wage the other day. As someone new to teaching, working 60 plus hours a week, I earn less than the minimum wage too. We would like to hear from teachers who can tell us when they divide the hours they're working by what they're earning, what in fact their hourly rate is. Do text us 2101. Nigel Hampton QC, who has been on Checkpoint many times in the past 3 years and has represented the Pike River families, of course, texted in about our reports on the shuttle buses and the buses operating up the mountains, both sides of the mountain at Ruapehu. 2 nights now we've reported on that, and Nigel says, echoing mining and forestry concerns, where are the proactive statutory transport regulators in the lead up to the ski bus disaster? Any evidence of an influential and protective required presence? In other words, prevention is better than cure, I suspect, is what Nigel Hampton QC is saying. It's nice to hear from him. And this from Albert. Mr Bishop is correct. Chris Bishop, he's talking about, of course, the National MP, that Ms Kingi's support of this police individual, Wali Homaha on LinkedIn, suggests that she knows him relatively well and that there is a conflict of interest. But why are these politicians yelling and screaming in Parliament while Minister Martin is talking? It's a disgrace. Where does this high school bully behaviour come from and why is it being tolerated in Parliament? These MPs represent us, the people of New Zealand, and it does not reflect the way most of us behave. Thank you for your feedback. Someone saying, how did the builders at Bella Vista not know that what they were building was so substandard? And in what way is their contribution being questioned and assessed? That's Brian of Ngāmotu. Brian is a regular correspondent. It's lovely to hear from you as always, Brian. It's 7.5 minutes to 6. Backcountry hikers say the government has missed the perfect opportunity to correct a century-old mistake and ensure one of the South Island's most beautiful spots went back into public hands. The Overseas Investment Office, they've been in the news a bit lately, has approved the sale of the lease on Mount White Station near Arthur's Pass to a Czech-born New Zealand resident. The property includes almost 1,000 hectares known as Riversdale Flats, which was originally intended to be part of the Arthur's National Park. And the Federation of Mountain Clubs says the government should have grabbed the opportunity to make that happen as it should have done. Rachel Graham has been talking to those who know this area very well.
It's an incredibly special spot. Riversdale Flats are open, they're accessible, wonderful scenic landscape values, and a road going right through it. So it's incredibly popular, incredibly accessible, and for generations of Kiwis have thought that this was their land.
That's Peter Wilson, the president of the Federation of Mountain Clubs. He says Riversdale Flats is the gateway to Arthur's Pass National Park, and people have had no problem accessing the area up until now, but there's no certainty that that will continue.
Particularly with the hardening of attitude around property rights, the potential for the lease to be sold overseas, it needs to be sorted out.
Peter Wilson says the legal status of the Riversdale Flats land isn't clear. with some people believing it is legally part of the national park and others saying it is part of the pastoral lease. He says the government and Land Information New Zealand had a chance to clarify its status before it went into new hands. The Deputy Chief Executive of Crown Property at Linz, Jerome Shepherd, says they did look into the status of the Riversdale Flats land, but says it's not straightforward.
It was gazetted as national park, and there's no argument about that in 1901, but it was not included in the Arthur's Pass National Park when that was created in 1929 and was had been farmed all that time and then was put on to the pastoral lease at a later stage. So it's a really unique and, in some ways a bizarre situation.
Jerry McSweeney owns a wilderness lodge at Arthur's Pass, which borders the Mount White station. He says while the land is under a pastoral lease, the owners have certain rights, including the right to trespass people. And he says the previous owners had sought permission to turn the wider station into farm paddocks, which would have destroyed a unique environment. Mr McSweeney says Linz have missed a golden opportunity to protect a special area.
I certainly wouldn't have Linz on my team if I was playing cards, because they've actually given away all their advantages. They've approved the transfer of the pastoral lease through the Commission of Crown Lands. They've approved the sale through the Overseas Investment Act, and they've given no indication that the destruction of 1,000 hectares of the native vegetation through Mount White, those consents won't be carried forward. And finally, of course, they haven't sorted out the Riversdale Reserve.
Jerome Shepherd from Linz says he is confident nothing will change about public access, and the new owner, Lucas Travnicek, has indicated he'd like to formalise that access and wants to resolve the issue around Riversdale Flats. Linz, the Department of Conservation and Mr Travnicek's representatives will meet this Friday to discuss the issue, but Mr Shepherd says the discussions may take some time. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
It's 6:04. Just reading the statement from police that has come in. Update, Woodville serious crash. There's not much to update, but the facts are pretty terrible. 2 people have died in a serious crash on Troop Road, Woodville, where a car collided with a train. 1 person is in a moderate condition and is being transported to hospital. The serious crash unit is investigating, and the road may be closed for some time. I don't know Troop Road, whether that is a major thoroughfare in Woodville, though I think there's probably lots of alternative routes there. But this is obviously a tragedy. A car colliding with a train. Woodville, which is a small community just to the east of the Manawatu Gorge, north of Wairarapa and south of Hawke's Bay. Tough times there in terms of the businesses after the closure of the gorge, and this is a tragedy for that community. Lots of feedback coming in tonight, and some rather delightful feedback. This from Greg, who is in Whangarei. John, without wanting to sound too much like a grumpy so-and-so, is it at all possible for Checkpoint RNZ News to not use all those TV reports with all the whoosh, whooshing and whoosh, swooshing sound graphic effects that seem beloved of the American networks and sometimes others? They no doubt look and sound fine on TV, but they sound really crap on the radio. Otherwise, 10 out of 10 can't fault Checkpoint. Keep up the great service. Greg, that wasn't a grumpy email at all, and I agree with you. Jim Shuto's report. Jim's a fantastic reporter, but those graphics, that was a TV report, wasn't it? We have a lovely relationship with CNN. They are wonderful to deal with. They always make their reporters available to us, but their reports are mostly made for TV, and from time to time you do get as they go to air. Thanks, Greg. A delightful email, and we were thrilled to receive your feedback. I typically do a 50-hour week, this teacher says, sometimes much more, and I regularly work through breaks because of duties and student support. I take home $20.83 per hour in the hand. John, I'm a teacher. Saturday morning, I left my young family at home at 8:15 and took a sports team away, arriving at 4:30 p.m. No meal allowance, no travel allowance. How many lawyers, builders, etc. would give up their Saturdays without reimbursement every Saturday? I have to say my son has played rugby since he was 4 years old, and since he's been at college, it's been teachers. Actually, it's parents this season, but boy, oh boy, there's been a lot of teachers who've coached him often 3 afternoons a week and turned up on Saturday mornings to watch him play. Clearly it's part of the job, but I don't think they're paid extra for it. This person says, I agree that teachers work hard, but in working out their equivalent hourly rate, they mustn't forget that they get 12 weeks of holidays every year, where the rest of us only get 4 weeks. That makes a huge difference to the numbers of hours worked each year, says Josh. And Fiona in Auckland Teacher says, a huge issue not mentioned this evening for schools, teachers and families is recruitment and retention of teachers. Some schools are already understaffed with no suitable applicants or no longer any applicants at all for advertised positions. This is leading to larger class sizes or reduced special programs in schools. Thank you for your feedback. Linda says, hi, just cooking my tea. And I got this happy feeling followed by the thought, Jacinda is back at midnight. Nothing against Winston. He was his best ever. Just wanted to share, Linda. Thank you. And sharing's what we love. On Checkpoint, you can text us 2101. You can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Talking of Jacinda Ardern being back in the job as Prime Minister tomorrow, I am interviewing her about that tomorrow afternoon. And we will bring that interview to you tomorrow night on Checkpoint. So we look forward to hearing about what she's been up to for the past 6 weeks and what she is planning to do once she returns to the job. All of that on Checkpoint tomorrow evening after 5.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. The Internal Affairs Minister says Pauline Kingi has been the subject of political attacks ever since she agreed to head an inquiry into how a new Deputy Police Commissioner was appointed. The inquiry was to investigate the process that led to the promotion of Wally Homaha, who made a comment in 2004 defending police officers accused of rape. The National Party says the fact Dr Kingi had endorsed Mr Homaha on the networking website LinkedIn was a conflict of interest. The Minister Tracy Martin announced Dr Kingi's resignation in Parliament, saying she did so with regret.
Ever since she was appointed to the role, she has been the subject of political attack. Those have been attacks on her integrity, attacks on her reputation, and even attacks on her legal qualification.
Tracy Martin has said she doesn't believe Pauline Kingi had a conflict of interest regarding the inquiry. The receivers of major building firm Ebert Construction say initial signs suggest the company could owe as much as $40 million. The company specialises in commercial and industrial work. Receivers were appointed last night and workers arrived at building sites this morning to find they were shut out and unable to carry on. The receiver from PricewaterhouseCoopers, John Fisk, says its directors received information last week that suggested it was going to incur significant losses from its contracts.
We've got some initial information from the company. It looks like there could be up to $40 million that's owing to creditors in total. But, you know, that number will need to be reviewed and we'll have a better idea on that as the receivership progresses.
John Fisk says with multi-million-dollar contracts and slim margins, things can go wrong very quickly. The former residents of a botched housing development in Tauranga feel they have no choice but to sue the City Council. The Tauranga City Council signed off on shoddy construction work at the Bella Vista development, leaving the homes too dangerous to live in. Last week it offered to buy the houses back at the price residents paid for them up to 3 years ago. Homeowner Sasha Tyrell and others rejected the offer, saying it locks them out of buying another house in the current housing market.
It has become apparent that the Council is not prepared to do what is fair and just in this situation, and therefore we have no choice but to issue proceedings and turn to the legal system for help. This is not a decision that we have taken lightly. We are real people, and we have lives and families that we want to be able to return to.
The residents say they'll stop legal action if the council pays market value for their properties. Zimbabwe's ruling party, ZANU-PF, has won the majority of seats in Parliament after this week's election. Official results from Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission show ZANU-PF has 109 seats against 41 for the opposition MED. 58 seats have still yet to be finalised. It's the country's first election since the former president, Robert Mugabe, was ousted in a bloodless coup in November. Primary school teachers say their full-day strike later this month will send a much stronger message than the originally planned half-day. The Educational Institute announced the decision, covering about 29,000 teachers and principals today. Teachers say they know the action on August the 15th will inconvenience many parents, but what they're fighting for is very important. The Educational Institute has been seeking a 16% pay rise and smaller class sizes, and the Education Ministry has offered increases ranging from 6 to 14%. The two sides have entered mediation to try and find a solution. Calmer weather in Northern California has helped firefighters working to control a deadly blaze raging for more than a week around the city of Redding. The blaze has killed 6 people since Thursday night and 4 people remain missing. The sprawling fire still covers 260 kilometres. Rescue crews searching for an Australian man missing at Mount Aspiring National Park are prepared to work through the night. The 29-year-old man, who's climbing alone, activated a distress beacon after failing to return on Monday. Search and Rescue Mission Coordinator Mike Roberts says the man had not been heard since then, but they got another alert this afternoon.
We had nothing for about 24 hours, and at 2:30 this afternoon, we received another notification from this device, and it showed that he'd moved some distance. Clearly, it's a good sign of life. He's making his way, or trying to make his way, to a place of safety.
Mike Roberts says they managed to get within 1.5 kilometres of the climber's position today, but snow, gale force winds and heavy rain prevented them going any further. He says they'll continue the search later tonight using a helicopter with night vision equipment. 2 people are dead after a car collided with a train just before 5 o'clock tonight in Woodville near Palmerston North. Another person is in a moderate condition and has been taken to hospital. The incident happened on Troop Road, which is expected to be closed for some time. Drivers are advised to avoid the area. It's 6:05. Sport. Northern Mystics shooter Maria Folau knows she'll be targeted when her side face the Central Pulse in the final game of the ANZ Premiership's regular season tonight. The Mystics suffered a heavy loss to the Pulse in round 5 without Folau, but then beat them a week later when she returned. Folau says she hopes her leadership will assist in a win and a place in the finals.
The best way that I can lead is to just do my job on court. And that goes for everyone in our team. We've got some great leaders who really put their hand up every day, every training. So as long as I'm getting the centre passes away and putting the ball through the hoop, then that's the best way that I can lead for my team.
Maria Folau. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen supports calls for a new stadium in Christchurch after the city missed out on test matches this year, and with the Crusaders defending their Super Rugby title at a ground that holds just 19,000 people. The debate over whether to build a new $465 million, 25,000-seat roofed stadium in Christchurch continues, with many calling it a waste of money in a city trying to rebuild, while others claim it would bring benefits to earthquake-damaged Canterbury. Hansen says the stadium needs to be built.
We'd have to get more hotels, so that's got to be good for the economy. We have to have more people come into the town, and that's got to be good for the economy, and I think that's the thing that's been forgotten. I think a lot of people have thought, oh, well, you know, why do we need a rugby stadium and why do we have to support that? But it's a bigger thing than that. You know, when you've been through an earthquake like that, that's what we need.
Steve Hansen, that's the news.
Strikes. A very strong and clear message that it's a one-day strike to show how serious this issue is. Lockouts.
Hundreds of workers are thought to be locked out of sites, and for those I spoke to, that means that they can't get to their tools.
Protests.
A very confronting way to introduce a storyline, and carried on later in the program, making inflammatory statements. Very, very inappropriate language and quite offensive.
All the action, morning reports, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to Noon, a new documentary about the late Celia Lashley, the passionate social justice advocate, author, former prison manager and much-loved parenting commentator on 9 to Noon. And after 10, 5 decades of ceramics and theatre design with Auckland artist John Parker. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to Noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine spells and isolated showers today, areas of fog tomorrow morning, otherwise mainly fine. Cloud increasing later tomorrow and rain developing about Taranaki. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne. Showers about Bay of Plenty, sometimes heavy, and a few spots of rain spreading to Gisborne. Manawatu to Wellington, including Taihape, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Long fine spells. Rain developing late tomorrow for Horowhenua to Wellington. Marlborough and Nelson, fine today. Rain developing tomorrow, heavy later. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers, heavy at times with possible thunderstorms. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine with variable high cloud. However, patchy rain developing tomorrow afternoon and becoming persistent about eastern Otago later. And the Chatham Islands, rain developing this evening, easing to a few showers tomorrow. It's 9 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. And thank you everyone for being with us. We just got this in from the police. This is about the Kohanga Reo National Park bus crash. Obviously, we've been covering this at length and safety issues with other buses on the mountain on the same day. This is from Senior Sergeant Neil Furlong, Whanganui Investigations Manager. Police are calling for any witnesses to the crash on Ohakune Road on Saturday, the 28th of July, last Saturday, of course, including passengers on the bus to come forward. The more information we have to support our investigations, the better, so please don't hesitate to contact us. Even if you think your information may not be useful, it could be valuable to us. So I guess they want to hear from anyone who was on the bus, obviously, but also anyone who saw it. If you have information, please call Taumata Nui Police on 07 895 8119 as soon as possible. That's Taumata Nui Police, 07 895 8119. Woodville, this fatal collision between a train and a car there, 2 dead in that. An absolute tragedy. An excellent texter has told us that there is neither flashing lights nor an arm barrier on that Troop Road crossing, simply a give way sign. People saying that other roads around it, including the State Highway, are open. So it looks like a local road, but absolutely tragedy, 2 dead in Woodville. Right, let's return to Ebert Construction, which has gone into receivership owing somewhere in the region of $40 million. Ebert's collapse follows the disasters at Fletcher Building, which remains in business, of course, but suffered losses of hundreds of millions of dollars on key construction projects. This morning we went to an Ebert's Construction site in Auckland and spoke to subcontractors owed everywhere between tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of thousands of dollars. No one was prepared to talk to us on the record as they waited to hear what their position is. Obviously they don't want to antagonise the receiver. So we spoke to the receiver, John Fisk of PwC.
Last week the directors of the company were given information about some of the contracts that were performing poorly in Auckland. And the new management up there had actually reviewed those contracts and established that losses that were likely to be incurred out of them were significantly more than what they'd originally believed. And as a result of that, the directors acted quite responsibly and appropriately given the circumstances, and they passed a resolution that the company couldn't continue to trade and requested that the bank appoint receivers.
So it wasn't that the situation has suddenly deteriorated, it's that someone new has assessed it?
New management in Auckland, yes. That's what we've been told, is fresh set of eyes on the contracts and establishing exactly what the position was. The directors were given new information that they hadn't been aware of.
This does sound strikingly similar to the Fletcher situation. So in short, Eberts were being paid less to complete a contract than it was costing them to complete it.
Well, that's what's turned out to be the position. And with these big commercial contracts, things can change very rapidly because they're dealing with reasonably skinny margins and big numbers, so things can turn very quickly. A number of the contracts that they've got on are multi-million-dollar contracts. So if you're into damages or delays, things can turn south very quickly.
You used the phrase reasonably skinny margins, and once again that's the Fletcher's issue too, isn't it? That the margins are so tight there's simply no safety net. And I just wonder, if this is becoming an industry-wide problem, and it affects so many people because, of course, there are so many subbies working for companies like Fletcher's and Ebert's.
I can't speak for the industry, but look, even the receivership of Ebert will put pressure on some subcontractors. They'll have missed out on probably 2 months of claims, and that can put significant pressure on those businesses to pay the wages and meet the obligations that they have. So. There is always going to be a knock-on effect from this sort of thing.
Is it too soon to say how much those subbies are owed in total?
Look, we've got some initial information from the company. It looks like there could be up to $40 million that's owing to creditors in total, but that number will need to be reviewed, and we'll have a better idea on that as the receivership progresses.
Gosh, even as a ballpark figure, $40 million is a lot of money. Do you have any idea of the kind of cents in the dollar recovery figure on that, or is it just way too soon to say that?
It's way too soon to know that. Clearly there are contracts that were making significant losses, but then there is also some contracts that have been quite profitable. What we're really focused on now is to get the best out of the situation and see what we can recover. But in terms of whether there's going to be money for unsecured creditors at the end of the day, I can't answer that at the moment.
Of course, not only is $40 million owing, but there are subbies, huge numbers of subbies with their gear on Ebert's sites. So everything from cranes to concrete equipment to basic building equipment. And not only are these people not getting paid, they can't go and earn money because they can't get their equipment. When will they be able to get on the sites and get their gear off?
Yes, we're working on that as quickly as possible. The reason why we locked down the sites is because there's a health and safety issue of people just charging onto the site, and also we don't want to risk contractors taking other people's gear as well. So we have to do that in a controlled way. But by this afternoon, on a number of the sites, we'll have arranged for people to be able to collect their personal belongings and their own equipment so that they can get on with other contracts. Some sites might take a bit longer, depending on what's involved and the complexity of any issues that we face.
The big issue that the sector is facing is that to get the work, the margins are so tight now that there is a huge element of financial risk attached to many of these projects. But if they build in margins to protect themselves from the risk, they don't get the work. They price themselves out of the job. So how do we get the balancing act right here?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it seems ironic that there is so much demand out there for the work at the moment, and yet there are places that can't make money. Now, I obviously see the worst end of it because by the time we get involved, there are major issues, but it does suggest that there is change that's needed and efficiencies and better practices and better resources put into this to avoid these sort of things happening. But in my career as an insolvency practitioner, over the years, there's been a steady flow of construction companies that we've dealt with.
That's John Fisk from PwC, who is acting as the receiver. A lot of feedback coming in from and about teachers. This one from Pam. Hi, John. I'm a little annoyed that teachers still get attacked for their so-called 12 weeks of holidays. If you take away the statutory holidays that everyone is entitled to, that leaves 10 weeks. Take away the 2 weeks I spent at school there over the summer break, 8. I spend 1 week of each break doing work, either marking, preparing and other related paperwork, etc. needed for my job, which I have no time during the term to do. I now have 5, then consider the 50-hour week, sometimes more, for which we get no overtime or time off in lieu. The 5 weeks are good, but not out of the ordinary. Then at the end of term, many of us fall sick, as it's too difficult to take time off being sick, having to prepare work for students while we're away, and relief teachers don't always teach. Those 5 weeks are inflexible, happening when all travel is at peak. Sounds a great deal. I can't understand why we don't get more primary or secondary teachers. Talk to the students about entering the profession and they quote poor pay and too much work and stress. That is what they see. We need more than holidays to keep us there. I'm afraid a lot of you are also pointing out teacher aides, bless them, earn less and don't get paid for their holidays. Very often teacher aides would like to hear from you. 2101. Zimbabwe's ruling party has won the majority of seats in Parliament in the country's first election since Robert Mugabe was ousted from power last November. Official results from Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission this afternoon show ZANU-PF has won 109 seats against 41 for the opposition MED. There are still 58 seats to be finalised and allegations of vote rigging have been circulating all day. But ZANU-PF will be forming the next government. The BBC's Fergal Keane reports from the capital, Harare.
This was a day in which conflicting hopes would finally collide. A day that began with the first results being posted outside polling stations. And a day of checking and listening. With this assurance to those who remembered rigged elections of the past.
We are absolutely confident that there was no cheating, we are absolutely confident that there was no rigging, and we would like to assure the Zimbabwean people that we as the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission will not steal their choice of leaders, we will not subvert their will.
The opposition has alleged vote rigging but still claims victory. Supporters acting as if they'd already won. It did feel premature.
The results show beyond reasonable doubt that we have won this election.
And inside, a senior party figure upped the stakes. Tendai Biti claimed victory and accused the government of plotting the assassination of his leader. This is the moment when the atmosphere in this election campaign definitively changed. Claims of an assassination order, of an attempt to steal the vote. Zimbabwe is now moving into precarious territory. The opposition claims are aimed at influencing public and international opinion ahead of an official announcement. But they drew this response from the ruling party.
Well, I'm only asking for Tendai Biti and his colleagues to respect the people of Zimbabwe, because his utterances are not a disrespect to ZANU-PF, it's a disrespect to the people of Zimbabwe that made their choice.
Up to now, this election has proceeded with calm and tolerance. It will take cool heads to keep it that way.
Fergal Keane with that report. Facebook says it's uncovered a sophisticated operation on its social media platform to interfere in the upcoming US midterms. The company found fake accounts on both Facebook and Instagram, which it owns, of course, 2 weeks ago, and says some of the fake posts have links to accounts used by the Kremlin. CNN's Drew Griffin reports.
Facebook calls it inauthentic behavior, and though Facebook can't be sure, it sure looks like Russia again. 32 pages with names including Black Elevation, Resistors, Aztlan Warriors, being followed by 290,000 accounts. The fake accounts also setting up and promoting real events and protests aimed at further polarizing U.S. political discourse. Many of the events did occur, including this one last year in New York City, attended by actual Americans who likely had no idea that the Resistors Facebook page was probably run by Russians. Another event by the same group was supposed to take place in a couple of weeks. Resistors set up a counter-protest against white supremacists at the White House August 10th. 5 other real groups signed on to participate. As Facebook was announcing its crackdown on these potential Russian sites, the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security was at a cybersecurity conference saying there's no doubt Russia meddled in the 2016 election.
Everyone and everything is now a target.
And Russian actors may be added again, comparing the upcoming midterm elections to a looming storm.
But today, I believe the next major attack is more likely to reach us online than on an airplane. We are in a crisis mode. The Cat 5 hurricane has been forecast, and now we must prepare.
Facebook says these current pages, all shut down, have the hallmarks of the activities the Russians did around the presidential election. Though there are some differences, this time the pages didn't lead back to Russian IP addresses, and they used third-party services to buy ads to boost their posts and encourage people to follow the pages.
Drew Griffin with that report. It's 23 minutes past 6. How do you get school children to pay attention and to really engage in the classroom? Because if they do, they'll do better. Of course. Well, a school in South Auckland thinks it's environmental. Children join in when they feel they're welcome and they feel they belong. And so they've grouped their students into villages, and teachers are referred to as auntie and uncle, and that's just the start of a classroom reinvention that appears to be boosting achievement for young Pasifika students, some of whom were struggling at other schools. Now, the Pacific Advanced Secondary School started life as a charter school, but next year will become New Zealand's first Pacific school in the state system. So what are they doing there? Indira Stewart went to take a look.
Hymns and prayer help these students kick off their school day. A striking parallel to how many schools in the Pacific region also start their day.
Father, we ask you to please have your hand upon each student.
It's well known that religion is strongly embedded in Pacific culture, and here at the Pacific Advanced Secondary School, simply known as PAS, faith is evident in school life.
It just takes me back to the island. It just makes me think about where I come from, where I originate from. And it just makes me feel as if it makes me feel like I got to cherish a culture.
Robert Momoe Mausu and fellow student Falaula Tuingamala both left the state schools they were previously attending and this year enrolled at PAS.
I really enjoy our teacher, Uncle Kali. In the classroom, he likes to speak in his native tongue sometimes, and then we like to learn, and somehow it helps us remember better whatever he's teaching, and I think that really helps.
Falaula says the school's cultural environment has made a huge difference to her learning.
It's not a school where there's students and staff, it's a family where we're all brothers and sisters, we have aunties and uncles. The environment is just amazing here, you know, and I feel really safe, I feel loved, and this has really become my family.
As well as the teachers being called uncle and auntie, the co-principals, a husband and wife team, are known as Tama and Tina, the Samoan words for father and mother. It's a model that co-principal Alaimalo Falefatu Inari describes as Pasifika mole Pasifika, by Pacific people for Pacific people.
We have different visitors come into us to look at what we do because they have a Pacific population in their schools, and you can't go past having a Pacific board, chairperson, principals, staff, and so we ask the kids to bring all of their Polynesianness to school.
PAS is one of 7 schools to be given designated character status under the Education Act, allowing them to receive state funding but sticking to their own approach, which may be based on culture, language, religion or a particular educational approach. PAS teaches the national curriculum within a Pasifika framework and provides a culturally responsive environment for their students. For example, they're grouped into villages which are each supported by a staff member or village parent. Mr. Inari says the model is helping to link cultural identity with learning.
They have very complex issues, our kids. They're Polynesian, they're Pacific, but they're urban. Their parents grew up with umukukas and climbing coconut trees and valud kalo and all of this sort of concepts. And our kids, a lot of them have no idea what that is. And so the parents don't know their world either. So a lot of the time we find the village parent being a bridge to that world and trying to help them understand the needs.
Dr. Michelle Johansson is an academic with expertise in the education of Pasifika students. She says the PAS model is needed.
If I stand in a Pākehā room, which I often do, and asked everyone to stand up and sever, they would just feel completely uncomfortable, and heaps of them would give it a go. Heaps of them would wish for that hole in the floor that they could jump into. Like for our Pacific kids, that's what we do to them every day. We ask them to step into a literacy that is not their own.
So these 2 movements, is there anywhere else? The others? Yes.
While the achievement rates of Pasifika high school leavers have been making slow gains in recent years, alongside Māori they still hold the lowest rates in the country. Co-principal Parehuia Inari says the school provides their students with a uniform, stationery and meals to remove barriers to learning.
Our key priorities to begin with, and you would have seen throughout our day, is to ensure that their basic needs are met. And so when they walk into these doors, the whole aim from the board is to ensure that education is accessible to all of our children.
The The school's co-founder, La'auli Savai Michael Jones, says both he and the staff are committed to changing the statistics for young Pasifika.
We want to move our people from being at the bottom of those social and economic statistics. We're wanting to see these young people leave and graduate from our school with some qualifications that they can move forward and fulfill everything that we believe they can be and designed to be.
PASS will get special status as a designated character school from next year. Mo te hōtaka o te ahipo nei, ko Indira Stewart aho.
And Indira's story was shot and edited by Claire Eastham Farrelly, a brilliant camerawoman here in our Auckland office. Boy, oh boy, we're getting a lot of feedback from and about teachers. Thank you. We really enjoy hearing from you, and people were incensed by that feedback we read out before about teachers having holidays. I've already read out one email in response to that. Here's a text. Teachers do not get 12 weeks holidays, nor do we work from 9 to 3. What we have is referred to as non-contact time. During this non-contact time, we do professional development, planning, marking, appraisals, collect resources, many bought from our own purses, put up new displays, lug our heavy furniture around so rooms can be cleaned, then lug it back to a new position so kids can return to a new room layout. If we are lucky, we may get a couple of days to ourselves and 2 weeks of non-contact time. The only time teachers can really take a physical and mental break is for about 3 weeks at Christmas before it all starts again. Ask any teacher's own family. We are always at work in the school buildings and in our heads. A lot of you saying stuff like that. We really appreciate hearing from you. That is Checkpoint for tonight. On behalf of our fantastic and hard-working team, it's been a pleasure to have your company, and we hope to enjoy it again tomorrow night from 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Internal Affairs Minister does not believe Pauline Kingi's online endorsement of the Deputy Police Commissioner amounted to a conflict of interest. Dr Kingi has today quit as head of an inquiry into the appointment of Wally Homaha. Ebert Construction's receivers says the company, which specialises in commercial and industrial work, could owe creditors as much as $40 million. PwC were appointed last night, and workers arrived at building sites this morning to find they were shut out and unable to access their own tools. Primary school teachers say a full-day strike in 2 weeks' time will send a stronger message than the originally planned half-day. Nearly 30,000 teachers and principals will stop work on August the 15th unless a solution is found in mediation with the Education Ministry. The union wants a